Kaya yaxatinil tekat Johan atlim kunil chish. Achtu yek ewuchin chasati. Kleed ke ko adachigi yawahi. Chakait Tláa. Du dat aya yawahi. Ushkanach haswita at. We ak kwan ku'u. Hastu anikach aya. An kuk wushkitan ani. Yank yachtitan. Ak kwan aya you hastu asak. Chakait Tláa awe. Tlaikach inach irin keriente. Te kwedich sati. An goon. ḳutudziteeyi. Achu a ḳutznu. Ḳutznu you do a song with ʼat playing. A ka aya hasa ani an goon. Yatatsu. Kena snu you do a song. Kena snu. Tlaikachina chun kanins killisnu you do a song. Yewa. Du datawe you tuch the tank. Shkapwe aya shkoon. A yich aya yewutien. Kanachwe atu nach yawa gut aya yug. Haina kawani kakawa akaya Tlingit inach yuch ewatani. Du jin kach aya. Hasawa chisht. Ruler team. Yewa. Jan koa. Du tuye wutien Tlingit. Kedenawe yuch ewatan. Ya du seek aya. We phone atunach kahits on kanins you do sak we phone. Ḳutudziteeyi atunach yuch adutli atki at. An away kuyaw dahai tushayech. Wujchi yes. Wan kanins konneya yandashan ni Tlingit. Kanachawe hasu tuasagu Tlingit chinach yuch asha atki. Ajawe yek aya. Wan kanins we tlelcha gugu. Kashuk gugu aya. An away wujin yuch atul atki. Yawa achtu wuk Aadé away yuch ewatani ye. Gedenach yi au shatu. Wan kanins had nakaswu at ya Tlingit chinach yuchila atki. Qaweach tuasago has to dat you tuch the time. Yewa stilqa khattati chinach. Wujin yejituneyen. Ya chaqay Tláa. Yachte shakt. Atlain ku'u aya has to in yuch ach watanen. Had nakaswu at. Kaya kwach tuasago yisaku. Has to atwas kuchu hajihyeti. Gwash hajide ye kwatitsu. Kaidi nawe hachuchye wutien. Kay nachka kuchen aya. Randall tetlichi you do a saku. Ye oe haina kawani. Kwan kanins yinakaswu at. Wayan wad. Gwasha date kone you tiwsha at. Gwash has to atwas kuchu. Kawa yikde gukwaha. Like atki aya. Atki tude aya. Kakwaha. Gwashyat atka kach aya. Yiyuch ʼatángi tin. Yuch watan. Juni tin. Jide kakwaha. Ye awa hakustiyi. Atlain shikat ku'u. Wujyach tutla atk. Wush tundatani. Wujyach tundatani awa. Aqaayach tuasagu yeyach saqayi. Yesakhan. Ach atas iqwedi. Yigoayach wan. Ach kaniyan. Tláa. Tláa plain. Inak ugud. Ya dat koa. Yan hasnak. Ya iqonate kanai. Yesh naxíxi a. Yan ikachwe du has. An chakitan. Aqawe. Iin aya ye has jikwane. Inedi, you has to a sock. Yo, a dat you took the ton. Aadé aya. At hakat cow de ya. Ya tlatki kach. Wasaha yaw sidak. Yes, the cut Lingít. Atlein ich kidach na kide awa has wushgatsen chak. Te choedi dachre atlein naxíxi ḳutudziteeyi. Yechwaji shankwedi, shangukedi. Yechwaji ḳutudziteeyi. Has du dach aya chukanedi ka guantan. Ka wushkitan. Te choedi aya atlein awa adachawe wuti. Hast du tu aya ʻutlitsinen? Ja, jedatsu hast du tu ʻutlitsin. Hast du kegach ʻutlitsin. Grilchi shwe ya keiti ʻltekat yuhan. Wan qanins qani ya nehihi ya achtuasagu. Tlingit chinach wushuch atulla atki. Gwas shukwachat, gwas shukwa yuhan. Gwas lituasagu ach itch yuch ewatani. Qaqwati. Gwas tleshian wunei. Heshwasaka kwati. Kakach te aqqa. Yes. Tak ite. Tak itich ay achtuasagu yan yinei. Qone wuchin yuch atulla atki. Gwas liya ach Tlingit. Achtuasagu adat awe yutiu de tan. Wasa yak qiqa a itch. Ye awe. Wuch atutli atk tiin. Kegach sener. Yegach sener. Ya uhan qaha yuch ʼatángi. Ye awe. Gedein yu dudzene Tlingit yuch ʼatángi tiin. Na joe wan qanins kagach tu aq. Aqa awish te gach tu. Tlachach tuash go I tu duhi ko a adat. Tis ye awe. Ye kagach tu sti. Ya ha yuch ʼatángi tiin. Qatlaan awe kunach awe Tlingit. A joe ech tuasagu yisaku. Wush in chagach sa ti. Tlach hinaqach tu aad. Tlach hinaqach tu aad. Ye awa hatuasagu kagach ye aaq ko aat te kat yuhan. Wan qanins. Gwash gedein aya. Yida. Yakuk qwashqeyi. Qwashqeyi. Wan qanins ko a. Like. Eshwasaka kwati. Wan qanins su gwash. Tlach gedein yuch ak gitan. Qachatsu. Heshwasaka kwati. Ye awe aadé ʻatúdultú ye. Aadé ʻatúdultú ye. Ja ha yuch ʻatángi tu nach. Grilchi shuhan yik echa. Yitu agesagu yuch ewatani. Ja dusa. Ja datsa. Grilchish. Let's see, recap. Let me know if I forget anything, those of you who can understand Tlingit. I just wanted to acknowledge Irene Caliente, Tláa, who passed away last week. She was a speaker of Tlingit. She was phenomenal. She was Tequidi from Angoon. And she went to a boarding school in Skagway, where when they spoke Tlingit, they would get hit on the back of their hand with a ruler. And despite getting hit and despite getting put in a situation like that, she held on to her language. So there's ḳutudziteeyi is often what I hear the name of the people of Angoon. The name of their island is ḳutudziteeyi, and the name of their village is Angoon. Next to it is K'nasnu. It's pretty close, which is called Kilisnu sometimes. It comes from K'nasnu. And then Kuk is also nearby, Basket Bay. So when we lose a speaker, because there's not very many left, I usually stop and I want to acknowledge what just happened. I want to take a moment and give words of encouragement to the clan and to the family and to the community, to their loved ones, to people that worked with them. I started learning Tlingit in 1996. So in that time, there's a lot of speakers that I've worked with that are gone now. And I just want everybody to know that that's part of the process. As we sort of go from endangerment to health as far as a language, as most of your speakers are going to be the old people, and you're going to have to go to them to really get a higher level of fluency. There's just so much stuff that they can offer just by sitting down and talking with them. Not doing the grammar stuff, like we're going to do some of that. But we're also sometimes just going to try to talk. And so I just want to acknowledge that and then just say, there was a Gwich'in elder named Randall Tetlichi who came among us probably a decade ago. And he visited an intermediate Tlingit class, just like this one. And we were just working on stuff, and early in the class, I said, do you want to share anything? He says, yeah. He says, you know, and he shared lots. But one chunk that I really remember is that he said, you guys are probably losing some of your elders who could speak. And if there's not very many of you who can speak, it's always a big deal. But if there's so few speakers, it becomes this really, really big deal. He said, and sometimes you're probably feeling like their wisdom goes with them, but it doesn't. When they pass away, it goes back into the land. And when you go out on the land and you speak your language, it comes back to you in your dreams. Mm. And so it's such a beautiful concept, and I like to share that. And I also say, but don't forget to work hard, and don't forget to do all this stuff. You know, it's not all through your dreams, but a lot of it is, and a lot of it is the subconscious and the subliminal stuff. But you have to do all the mechanics of it, of the language learning process. But like, you gotta hurry up and get to the point where you could talk to these elders and you could share stuff with them and you can understand what they're sharing with you. It should be a lot more listening than speaking. But if you can get to a point where you can talk to them, it's very fun, it's very enjoyable. And I was so thankful that her daughter, Ronalda, we were texting videos back and forth to each other at times. And so sometimes when people start to get quite elderly, they really want to speak Tlingit. And sometimes you need technology to help. And sometimes it can be very helpful with stuff like that. Because you could just basically have a conversation that's a series of videos. And there's other ways to do that too. The other thing that I said is sometimes when we start class is we're just going to start by speaking Tlingit, right? And you know, it's the fall, so it's still early in the semester. But I want to say, don't worry, don't panic, don't look for the nearest exit. Like, just stick with it. And while you're listening to Tlingit, start to transition to a point where you think, what can I say about that? Even if it's just a little thing. I think starting the process of saying, when someone speaks Tlingit, I feel like I should respond. And we'll work our way up there, right? So as we go from fall to winter to spring, by the time it hits spring, I want there to be conversation. Conversation is what heals languages, it's what heals us. And so if it's always just the studying and the looking at the parts, it'll be an incomplete picture. So the big picture, sort of like the parts are like drawing the lines, but then the language is using it in conversational ways, is putting the color onto the picture, right? So it's going to make the hue, it's going to make the complete picture. But also don't worry. It's not like you have to talk or your grades go down. It's nothing like that. But it's just about like challenge yourself. Even if what you say is tangential, like sometimes it's heavy stuff, right? And so maybe if it's heavy stuff, it's not a great time for like a joke afterwards. But there's other times where we're just trying to sort of force conversation to happen. And we'll talk about all kinds of tools, different things we can use. But when we're in some of those other times where we're using the language, you know, we're going to start the class, we're trying to use the language a little bit. And we'll talk throughout the semester about ideas and who may be taking turns a little bit later in the semester. Someone gets to lead the opening conversation. And I'm always happy to do it. But then it's always got to be a sharing of voices as we start going from intermediate to advanced. Now it becomes sort of the collective thing, not just, you know, you're not just learning anymore, you have to start using a lot more. But once we really start rolling, don't worry about like taking a different direction if you want to. And if someone takes it in a different direction, try to follow them, right? And try not to, we're going to have these times that are, I guess by the technical definition, there'll be immersion times in class. Where we're just going to try to use Tlingit as a whole language. But that means we're going to have opportunities for you to engage through the chat, in the Zoom, through other things, so that, you know, we'll just talk about tools and methods of how to stay in the conversation, and then also how to make notes of things so you can ask questions. Like, oh, what was this thing that you said? I was real curious about that. But like, sometimes if you stop and look at a little piece and think about it too hard, then the conversation just keeps going, right? Like one time I was recording these two elders, and as I'm talking about something quite sensitive, and it was before I kind of I got a pretty good understanding of the Teslin dialect right now, but this was probably 8 years ago when I knew that there were some things, there was an M, I knew that, but they kept saying "gi," right? And I was like, why are they saying "gi"? You know, and so as they were speaking Tlingit, and I was listening to them, and I can understand what they were saying, but then my brain started thinking, oh, what's "gi"? I wonder if "gi" is the same as "ga." Maybe that's, and then at that point they turned to me and asked me a question. And so I said, what? Yes, Yasa. And so then they said, well, are you listening to us? Yeah, and so people can see it in your faces too sometimes if they're talking to you and you start sort of overthinking, or if that, I think as we move into more and more immersion environments, your English brain is going to want to like jump into the conversation and switch it back over to English, right? I think your brain, the English brain, I think in a colonial atmosphere will panic. Will panic and be like, I'm going to drown, I need to get to the surface, where that's not the case. But I think sometimes we'll talk about this stuff. But anyways, I just want to start class with that. And does anybody want to say anything before we move on to the next steps? Anybody have any thoughts or questions? The plan for today, we've got one class this week. We have a super class tomorrow. And we're going to see what it's like, because there'll be, I don't know how many people will be here. I think it's going to be next door for the in-person. Usually we have 2 who come to Advanced Tlingit in person. So we do probably have room for 10 more. But if 30 people show up, I don't think we have room for everybody. So I don't know how that's all going to work. We'll figure this stuff out too. I might see if the bigger hall is open and we might move over to that. We'll see what happens. It's the first time we're trying. But then we won't have class on Thursdays. That means we got to smush a bunch of stuff in today. So that's the goal. So today we're going to go over maybe the first 1, 2, 3, maybe up to chapter 3 in beginning Tlingit. We're just going to move through beginning Tlingit pretty fast, only repeating stuff like once or twice. But I want you to think about, as we're going through it, do I remember this stuff? Do I understand everything I'm hearing and saying? And if someone came up to me and said, just an individual, not a whole class, not a whole community, but just one person came out and said, hey, I'd love to learn Tlingit. Teach it to me. could you teach this concept that we're going over to one person? Do you know it well enough? Because you're going to have to. You are receiving the antidote, and you are going to have to go and teach other people, whether it's an individual, family members, groups, classes, daycare, language nests, whatever it is. If you're going to keep going with Tlingit, you probably end up teaching. It's probably one of your suggested routes. And then, I guess one last thing before I'll open it up again. As of Monday, masks in UAS classrooms are optional. So that's the case starting next week on Monday. Do what you feel like you need to do. Also, if you're feeling sick, stay home, get tested. I know that there's like a little cold that is going around. Flu season is coming. There's probably another vaccine booster coming out, probably around the same time as the flu booster is what I was last told. And they're gonna try to put all the strains in there, so you can get like a mega booster thing. But just keep that in mind with the classes here. At some point, I'm probably gonna ask them to take down my aquarium so I can get out of this cage. But we'll see. So with all of that, thoughts, questions, concerns, everybody okay? Check the chat. Okay.
I've got a slightly removed question.
Okay.
But I was looking at the syllabus and was wondering when the readings are listed on certain days, are they assigned on those days or are they due on those days?
That's a good question. Yeah, and the syllabus is something we will keep an eye, like how well we're pacing to what the proposed thing is. But yeah, if it says read chapter 3 for Tuesday and it's on Tuesday, that means when you walk in the door, you should have read that chapter. Then we're going to go over that stuff. And so it's a pretty important part of this process because once we're done, so beginning Tlingit, it has a workbook, right? And we're still trying to figure out, there's probably a bunch more exercises we want to make for it. But when we get into the intermediate Tlingit materials, you're going to read a grammar. And a grammar is not always the easiest thing to read, but basically what it tries to do is it says, let's explain all the parts of the language. So that's what the grammar attempts to do. And the grammar is called ʼatángi. So you'll read it, and you'll look at all these exercises, and you'll come in, and we're going to supplement it with other stuff. So I was thinking about this today, because I had an intro to journalism class at the University of Minnesota in the early 1990s. And for whatever reason, the professor would say, go read chapter 2. So I would go read chapter 2. And I would come to class, and they stood up, and they opened the book, and they said, chapter 2. And they read the whole thing out loud. It drove me crazy, because I thought, hey, I read this. Aren't we going to do, and then we would talk about it. But I couldn't figure out why they would assign reading and then just do the exact same thing. So the idea here is to assign reading, then we're going to do a bunch of exercises. Because in the past, I've been missing a bunch of exercises. And so as we get further into the semester, you're also going to have opportunities to create little exercises for us to try. Just bite-sized morsels. You're going to bring little language snacks in for us. But you'll have the chance to work in teams. You'll have the chance to just share, and it's just a sharing of ideas. I'm not expecting you to teach the content, but if you're reading it, so what I'm thinking, okay, so here's what I'm generally thinking. So let's say right around the 3rd or 4th chapter talks about modifying nouns, right? So when we talk about modifying nouns, we're going to be learning what an adjective is in Tlingit. We're also going to learn about how to put suffixes onto a noun. So I've got a bunch of exercises for this stuff. So here's what I'm thinking. Let's say that was the chapter for next Tuesday. It isn't. It's just a scenario. So you would come in, you would have read that whole chapter about modifying nouns. Like, okay, I've read it all. I don't know. And you would come in and would do a bunch of exercises. I got a whole slideshow that talks about modifying nouns. And we'll basically end with putting possessive suffixes on a whole bunch of nouns. That's going to be probably the main class for that day. Then you'll sign up for a spot. We'll all go home. When we start the Thursday class, your group will show us an additional exercise on how you think we can also practice these and learn them. Because a big part of, what the book presents is like, here's what these are. Here's a table with 50 of them. Go memorize them. If you got ideas on how to commit those to memory, you want to make we call it a gim kit. This is beyond me. Or like, what's the other thing that people do? Mm-hmm. Online Quizlets. Want to make a Quizlets? Want to make a gim kit? I don't know that language, but I was doing a podcast with these folks who speak, they just said it. What language is it? Hold on, I'll look at it. I'll look it up, hold on. Pause for effect. Nanticoke. The Nanticoke language. And so they were talking about the Nanticoke language, and they said, we don't have very much of a social media presence, and we need this, we need a website and stuff. And I said, somebody get us a millennial. And they said, no, it's Gen Z. I was like, oh, I didn't even know. Anyway, so if you got ideas, just a short thing too, just like 5 or 10 minutes, and we'll start with that. So as we sort of get further along, my suggestion is we always try to start with conversation. Then we always try to start with a little exercise based on the thing that we just learned. Then we move into the new content. So that's what I'm going to suggest. And there's probably 20 of us in here. So we'll divide the work. Even those of you signed up for 0 credit, you'll have opportunities to give us your labor. And if you want to chip in, you can. Okay. Any other questions?
I'm not a millennial.
Huh? I'm Gen X. Someone else said, I'm Gen X. I was like, no, you're not. I was like, yeah, I am. And I looked it up, and they were called a geriatric
millennials.
That's right.
Millennial.
Oh, okay.
Geriatric.
An elder millennial? An elder millennial?
I don't know.
And pretty soon this is gonna be what comes after Gen Z? You gotta start over?
There is a Gen A. That's our
Gen A?
Yeah.
Just go right back to the beginning? Our kids are Gen A?
I think so. I think Alpha.
Can we name one of these?
Yeah, it's Gen Alpha.
Gen Alpha?
Yeah, that's our kids.
Okay. Next one could be like Gen Cheat or something. We get to name one of these and sing it. Call a generation committee. We want to name one of these. Okay.
Kune, inkage aadé, ya ḳutudziteeyi, nash aadé atu Tláa. I didn't plan for Wednesday, and I'm on work travel, because I can make a little bit of tomorrow. As much as I want to be home, that's not happening in the cards this week. How much of a problem is that?
It's never a problem. It's never a problem. So if anybody has to miss class because of work schedules, because of anything like that, all the classes are recorded exactly for this situation. So just watch and it's sad if you can't be here and you want to be, but we're always happy to work around schedules, right? And so there might be times too, there'll probably be a couple times this semester where I'm traveling and the whole thing's a Zoom. So it's up to you folks whether you want to come in here, and we can coordinate with the in-class folks. Does someone want to run the technology for us? If not, everybody just Zoom from wherever. Totally up to you guys. But if you're going to Zoom from one location, I could leave the gadgets with someone. If someone wants to be the gadget tip. But if you end up missing a class, if you're in the 0 credit option, you don't have to tell me. But you can if you want to. If you feel like, I don't want you to think that I don't care. So, but whether or not, you can always just let me know, and I'll just sort of make a note of it in my mind. But then your responsibility is to watch the class because they're recorded. I don't think I posted the last one, but typically, I'm still in pre-season form. And when I'm in mid-season form, we get out of class, I go home, I eat dinner, put my kids to bed, after wrestling with them, and then I upload the video, I put all the resources up. And we're going to talk about all this stuff today as well, like all the resources we're going to use for this class, how to use them, how to access them, how to deal with broken links. And then, so typically they're available by about 11 p.m. on the times, like this class should be up by about 11 p.m. tonight. So then if you want to review it, if you want to watch it, tlingitlanguage.com, learning Tlingit, intermediate Tlingit. And I'll show you how to get there, and I'll show you what it's generally going to look like. And I'll show you, you get the keys to the castle, or to the longhouse, or to what, we don't have keys, whatever. You get we're going to open all the doors, but I'm going to show you what the doors are. What's that?
You're not gonna get hit on the head when done.
No, yeah, you just gotta, the doors won't be open. No one's gonna bonk their heads on the low overhang or anything. But what I mean by that is when folks step into intermediate Tlingit and they start going into advanced Tlingit, one of my goals is to give you access to everything that's ever been printed, recorded of Tlingit. So I will show you how to access all that stuff. But sometimes all the links are written in Tlingit because they're not always for everybody. I'm not trying to hide anything, but people do exploit people. But anyways, hundreds and hundreds of hours of recording, audio, video, all the texts. Some of them I won't tell you on the recording how to get them because lawyers will write me letters. So if you're ever like creating materials that have languages for your language, for Tlingit, for Haida, for Tsimshian, there's certain presses that you shouldn't use because they will copyright it and they will not let you distribute PDF versions. It's messed up. Because when they wrote me, they sent me their lawyer letter. I said, okay, well, I'll just take our materials from our own endangered language off this website that's designed to give it to the people. But whatever. So, anyways, it's a fight for different.
I know yatee and tlesh'ushke, but I have it in my notes and didn't write anything down. Tlesh'uke.
Okay. Okay, a quick mini lesson on negativity. Once I download it. Whoops, fits. So this is a larger slideshow about negativity, which we'll get to later. Like we're gonna learn about, but basically we're talking about when a verb goes negative, not like general negativity, like someone who's like a real downer,
Like that guy?
Yeah. Right, he's probably just like, I live in a trash can. Y'all got nice houses. This economy's messed up, man. Okay, so I relate. Okay, and this, but I thought of, okay.
We've got a whole song about living trash.
This came about because I was doing a subject and object, well, I should say an object and subject exercise with Kakwanish George Davis, which you will get to much later, where we'll take a verb and we'll put every possible object-subject combination for that verb, every single possibility. So I just wrote them all out in English, and then I said, I love you, I love y'all, I love them all, I love people, I love something, you love me, you love us, you love them, you love y'all. Wait, that didn't work. You love them all. right? So just sort of going through this whole thing. And then, so he was just saying that, and his wife, she was always in the next room, right? Watching TV or talking on the phone. So then we get to the negative parts. I don't love you, right? So, and I'm just like saying, I would say the phrase in English and he'd say it. Like, I don't love you. He goes, Sean! So funny. And then we got to the end and we did all of them. I don't love you. I don't love y'all. You know, we did all of them. And at the end he says, well, here's another one. Kesh da sa I was like, what? I don't love anything? He's like, yeah. And I was like, perfect. I don't love anything. So then at some point I made this, don't come at me, Sesame Street. We love you. We'll teach Elmo. We tell Elmo how to say goodness cheese. We'll teach Oscar how to say this or whatever he wants to say. But anyways, this is all part of a larger lesson. This is a sneak peek into your future where you'll be learning about thematic prefixes and object and subject pronouns and what those mean. We're not going to like hammer on it right now. But all these things are out there. There's a whole folder called slideshows. You can look at all this stuff. We got a plan and we got a certain pace that we're gonna keep. So then these are thematic prefixes. We'll talk about it. It's basically a noun that you can put onto a verb, right? And then it starts going through. Here's how you change the object. Here's how you change the subject. We'll do a whole bunch of this stuff. We're not gonna do it right now. Then what happens when it goes negative? When that verb goes negative, it changes a lot. So you can't just say, like you say love, not love, right? I love, I don't love, right? So you throw the word don't in there, got a negative. I was just talking with someone today about how they were listening to this anthropologist who said, I learned Samoan, it's so easy, it's such an easy language. It's like no languages are easy. But English is really easy. I'm just kidding. So when you go negative, the verb does change, right? So that's what this is showing, right? So then it shows you the negative versions. So at the end of this, related to the question, there is a set of verbs. These are the ones we know of. There's probably a few others where there is a positive version, so is. There's a negative version, isn't. And there's an opposite version, right? The antonym. It's called the negative antonym. And so there, for example, you can say, everybody say, yatee, yatee, kesh uke, kesh uke, kesh ushke, kesh ushke. So you got good, not good, bad. So, and I had thought about this stuff before because when you say yatee and kesh ushke, those are two different verbs. You cannot change the classifier without changing it to a whole different verb. You can't change the classifier group. It can go, you can change the classifier between certain sort of, it can go, you can add the letter I to it. You can add the letter D to it. But if you change that consonant in there, it's a different verb. So there's also smart, lucky, tidy, fun, strong. Also, you don't have to repeat them. I'll say ʼqutudziteeyi, shechait, unique, ʼasagu, shitzin. Now the negative versions of those. Not smart, not lucky, not tidy, not fun, not strong. Kesh yakuske, kesh ushchait, kesh unique, kesh kesku, kesh ushtzin. Now the negative antonym, bad, dumb, or foolish, unlucky, messy, boring, weak. Kesh ushke, kesh yakushke, kesh ushchait, kesh ushnik, kesh keshke, ḳutudziteeyi. Eventually, so I think a big part of your language learning is always like, here's some new stuff, commit it to memory, find ways to use it, start to learn how the grammar works, and figure out how you're going to ask questions about the language. Right? Like, oh, hey, I noticed this thing is that. Is it because of this? Doesn't matter if you're wrong. Keep thinking about it. Keep thinking about it, right? Okay. Cheers, Oscar. Oh, teshkuha. Yeah, and there are some concepts in Tlingit where there's no way to say it. You have to say a negative thing. And by that, like teshkuha means it's obvious, and it means it's not invisible. That's really what it means, not invisible. There's another one, generous. I once asked Nora, how do you say generous? And she said, kesh ushqeq. And I said, not stingy? She says, yes. So like there's some neat things to think about as well. Like there's certain things in Tlingit where like there's no actual verb for that. You have to say not some other verb, right? And so you're gonna find a few things like that. So wuha is basically to move, it moved invisibly, right? I think I had an example, I think that was in here. I'll never remember. All semester, I'll never remember which class I talked about what thing. But I had this dog, and if you're like eating some kind of food, like just smashing it, and you're just into the food, then you look over and be like, hey, that dog's like closer. And then but you never see him move. That would be yatee cage. He just moves imperceptibly. The next thing you know, he's like right here. He was a bad begging dog, but it's a good example for that kind of verb. Okay.
When you're saying the negative verb ones, to say it like jokingly, would it just be by the tone of your voice, or is there something you add on to say it jokingly?
Oh, to like tease someone or something?
Yeah.
For teasing, that's a really, like, English has sarcasm and different things that you handle with the tone, the way you deliver it, right? Like the tone of your voice, right? And sometimes it's funny because you'd be like, well, you did a really good job there. Yeah, but that's funny because like I am smiling and it's kind of climbing up at the end. But if I'm being mean, it's like, you did a really good job, right? Then it kind of tails down, right? So I'm communicating emotion through the language. And I do think Tlingit does that, but I don't fully understand how, right? And so the way that Tlingit humor often works is, for example, there's a verb, ḳutudziteeyi. ḳutudziteeyi means somebody tried it and failed completely, just completely failed. Like all the, what do they call them, fail videos, those would all be ḳutudziteeyi ḥuyautahai, failing movies, right? But there's a negative version of that, ḳesh ḳutudziteeyi, which usually means not bad. Or you could say ḳesh ḥutudziteeyi. And so usually people translate that as good job. But the literal interpretation is you didn't fail completely, right? Which is kind of fun. It's just kind of a funny one. Like when I learned it, and Ella just said, ḳesh, and then she would laugh, right? So I don't think the humor is delivered always in the tone of the language itself, but in the laughter that comes right after it. That's what it seems like to me.
Or they go a.
Yeah. You get a feeling. Yeah, that's a good question though. That's a good, like as we look for some sort of things to experiment with and see, like humor. Like there was, I went down to Vancouver one time for this language thing with a couple of elders, Kehinak and ʼatángi. And I thought we were going to be filming them. And then someone said, okay, we're going to film you and this elder. I'm like, what? I said, yeah, if we want to see what like a second language learner, how the differences in communication. It's like, nobody told me this. What are we going to do? I said, I don't know. What do you want to do? It's like, let's have a funny story contest. And so we did. And that was kind of fun because we were both like intense, but then also trying to tell these funny stories. And so it was a good time. Okay, good question. Any other questions? Thoughts?
If we're trying to say I didn't fail completely, would it be tlingit?
That's it. And there's a story where Raven loses his nose. Probably listen to it at some point this semester. And when it takes him a long time, when he finally finds his nose, he makes a fake one out of a piece of bark. He comes up and he sees his nose and he goes, which is just hilarious. Like, because also like humor just works kind of different in Tlingit. Like, that's just very funny. And he sees his own nose and he's like, that's not bad, right? You know, and so like, and then you know, of course, he steals it and leaves. And then like, so then at the end of this story, it's a really great story because Donawak Austin Hammond is telling the story in front of a hat that's made for the story. And then he gets done, everybody claps. And also ʼqutudziteeyi and ʼatángi is live translating the story. And it's beautiful. It's amazing, amazing, amazing. And then they get done and everybody claps and it gets real quiet. And then, I don't know who said it, there was an elder there and she said, "Isani hluwu aya." That's your paternal uncle's nose. And everybody just busts up laughing. It's so funny. And we're going to talk about this stuff too. Like, you can tease a lot in Tlingit. The big thing is like, don't hurt anybody's feelings, know what kinds of things are funny, and know your audience, right? Like, we go to these immersions, and sometimes if the setting's right, we will tell some dirty stories and dirty jokes, you know, just in terms of like what the content is, and that's stuff we won't say around certain people because we know they'll get upset. But especially like two people who know each other really well, sky's the limit, you know, maybe there is no limit, I don't know. But, and we'll talk about some examples of some of that stuff. We'll see. We might have to pause the recording, but we'll see what happens.
So, what's the difference?
Oh, Richard?
He promised a lesson on farts. Do you have that?
I do. Okay. We'll do that next Tuesday. That'll be a good preview into what we're going to do with verbs. And we'll talk about the history of that document. It's called the scatic categories of the Tlingit verb. There's a whole backstory behind that too. But yeah. Okay. We should take a break. We'll come back. We'll start going through beginning Tlingit. And then after we get through a few chapters, we're going to pause. I'm going to show you a bunch of the resources we're going to use, our class website, how to access the online verb database, a bunch of stuff. I don't know, 5 minutes? Is that enough time? Come back in 5 minutes. And we're back. There was no secret conversation that just took place about who we don't like or trust anymore. Everything's just normal, perfectly normal. Okay, so let's chat a bit about the resources we're going to use. I think I'd like to just show you them, and we'll do deep dives on these throughout the semester. But every text that I show you, like you, by the end of this semester, you should master those. You should also, technically, if you're serious about this, you should have them on every device that you carry with you. Whether you're carrying a tablet, a smartphone, a laptop, if you have any of those things, it should be on there. I learned today about shortcuts. You put a shortcut on your home screen of your phone, and there I got one on there now. It's called Tlingit Verb Dictionary. I just poke it, and that just goes right to the dictionary. It's fabulous. So we'll go through these. I think maybe we'll start with that one because it's one of my favorite books of all time. So this is the Tlingit Verb Dictionary. This is $9, which is $200 online in some places right now because people be scammers. And also says UAS bookstore on there, which also doesn't exist anymore. It used to be right down the street. Now it's a brewery, right? And Red Spruce, which is yummy. And right next door to it is a restaurant my cousin owns. Right? Okay. This has a yellow, kind of a gold-colored cover. I copied these basketry designs to put them on the dictionary that I made because I talked to these two people, Constance Nash, Jillian Story, Knots Tláa, and Shachu Ka. And I said, can I make a dictionary based on what you guys did? They said, it's your language. Do whatever you want. We just tried that out. And they also said, don't ask us anything because we haven't worked in Tlingit in a long time. They're probably both gone now. I did get to have a phone conversation when I took the last Tlingit class I ever took before I started teaching Tlingit kind of full time was with Keuchne Dowenhauer and Huaynak, Richard Dowenhauer, and we just translated Tlingit texts. It was wonderful. Raven stories, Battle of Sitka. I think those are the two main things we worked on that semester. And we did it through a telephone. Old school, like a conference phone. Impossible. Okay. This dictionary, it seemed to be sort of, I guess, a measuring device, I think. Like if you were messing around with this book, like you were really trying to learn and speak the language, right? Because it's intimidating, I think. At least it was for us. We're like, I don't know. It's like got all these hyphens and all this other stuff in it. Basically, I would read the whole thing if I were you. I haven't read the sort of preface and the post, what do you call it, postface? Prologue? The little text at the beginning and the end and in the middle. I haven't read those for a long time. Probably they didn't understand, they were theorizing on so much of the language. And they documented so much wonderful stuff. They probably went around some stuff, right? Because they were fabulous, but I think they're also from a faith-based kind of background, and sometimes they just go around things like pooping and peeing and any of the sex verbs. And there's verbs for everything. If there's a thing, we got a verb for it, probably. And so I had a wonderful conversation with Richard Dowenhauer, and he said, they got all the verbs. It's like, they didn't get all of them. It's like, what did they get? It's like, we can't poop, can't pee, can't make more people. And I was taught all those verbs. And so so they do have, like, they're missing a few things. But I think it was just, they probably didn't want to ask people about that. But basically you have two sections. English to Tlingit, alphabetized by the English alphabet. So if you go here, you're going to see abandon, and then they're going to show you what kind of verbs would have that. So it's these large concepts, right? What we might call a translation equivalent, which you could boil down to like one or two words. Then it's going to show you a verb. So this is a verb, that is a verb. Then underneath it, they're going to give a couple of examples. This is wonderful, and the sample sentences are very fun. I'm in this long-term goal practice thing where I'm typing all of the sample sentences so they'll all be in the new dictionary at some point, probably when I'm beyond middle-aged, right? But there are a couple things to keep in mind. They have a tendency to write some vowels long that we would write short. So this one I would write WUDUDLI underline GAAS. They also tended to write a long low with a downward tone. Just ignore that one. It just means long and low. That's all it means. And so they would also put a hyphen with some things that I probably wouldn't put that hyphen there if I was writing it out. And then there's this big fight going on right now, or debate. Maybe it's a debate about whether there should be word separation. So basically, there's a school of thought that says when a verb becomes a noun, you should write it as one word. I don't think I'm on board with that. It's not like for me, it's not a should there be pickles in the salmon spread argument, which the answer is no, in case you're wondering. But
That's the way.
ruins it.
What about the cow pickles?
No pickles.
What?
No pickle. No, it's pickle free. You could drop this clap. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Okay, what is it? It's
Put whatever you want
I
into
think there's a phrase for this. Like it's ʼatángi. Is that what you said?
Oh, it's the phrase you're looking for is tesh. There it is. I don't like it. It doesn't taste good to me. Okay, but so for example, you see ʼatángi. So there's going to be a meeting of linguists and language workers probably next month where we're going to have a bunch of discussions. And one of those is should these things be written? So for example, ʻatyaawene is respect. So there's one mode of thinking that says we should write that as one word so that people can see it's a noun. But I think we should write it as 3 words so that we could see, so it's easier to change it into a verb. You'll recognize the verb. So you don't have to pick sides like the pickle thing. Fine. But, okay, anyways, but you're going to have sample sentences here. That's how the English works. A couple of other things that this doesn't have is there's additional information for verbs that is not in here. The most important 2 things that I think aren't necessarily written clearly in here is what we call the conjugation type and the stem variation. And we're going to get to that stuff, but basically every verb belongs to one of 4 conjugation types: 0, na, ga, and qa. And I'll make a note of this. Make a note of this right here in our class notes, because you should remember this. 0, na. Oh, I'll put it in here. So what this means is 2 things. The verb will conjugate certain ways. So it will determine, like, when you put it in the future, when you put it into the perfective, there's going to be certain rules, and this is going to be part of those rules. Oh, is this a 0? Okay, it goes this way. Is this a na? It goes this way. They're also associated, not like, that doesn't mean like the box is closed, it can only be this type of thing, but they are loosely associated with meaning. So this is kind of goal-oriented, or it has some sort of finish point or an ending. That's a 0. So usually like there's some sort, it has reached a goal, or there is some goal that it's trying to reach. A na verb is kind of an ongoing thing, or there's no stated goal. Ga is an upward thing, qa is a downward thing. That's just sort of generally, right? Sometimes it's going to make sense. It just keeps on rolling. Okay, that's na. It made it home, that's 0. It's going up the hill, that's ga. It's going down, it's qa. Some of them aren't going to make sense, right? But that's one thing they don't write in here. You can find it by some kind of reverse verb investigation stuff. And we'll get to that. Let me check the chat. Okay, ďalší. And then going back,
What was that called?
conjugation type. And I will sometimes call it conjugation class. Every verb has one. And when you have the command form, you have to say it. So for going back to that, just to show an example of how this stuff works. So if we wanted to have these, we could say a zero form would be eat it. Anybody know the command form for eat it? Ха. It's just ха. And so ха is eat it, because that's a zero conjugation, right? So the command form reveals it. Anybody know the command form of go to sleep? Nata.
Or not today.
Or not today. Go sleep right now. We'll keep the day off of it for
We
now.
say at my house, not today, we'll do it tomorrow. That time.
I might be composing a song that's called Not Today Colonizer. It's going to be fun.
Are you telling him to go to sleep now?
It can be interpreted two ways. Okay. What about stand up for one person? Get down. Or you could say get down. And so that's
Oh, I see.
qa, that's ga conjugation. What about sit down?
Yatee.
Or just one person?
Anu.
Anu. Naxíxi. So this, sit down, stand up. Right, so the command, and it'll be there in other ones too, and we'll get to all of that. This is, again, looking at the resources, but also doing a sneak preview of what's to come. There will reach a point where all of this stuff makes sense. Then you'll be like, I remember when I didn't know what a conjugation type was and what it meant to a verb. But you will. So then this is searchable. So if you have it as a PDF, if you put it on your phone, put it on your computer, you can enter sleep. And then you'll pull up all the verbs that say sleep. ʼyīt nasta. Put your son to bed. Close one eyes, really close as when sleeping. Kidaluk. Close your eyes. Command form, zero conjugation. Aganach ta ashitzech. They are indulging in sleep too much. There's no judgment in this book.
Is there ever a time when you're reading it from the book where that dash could be a glottalized stop? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, this?
Just ignore it completely. Yeah.
That's just showing you there's a suffix there. For whatever reason, they just wrote them apart. Like I would write Y, high tone, A, N, high tone A, underline X.
Okay.
I also missed the tone on a few things too.
Mm.
But if you look through my stuff, there's all kinds of mistakes. I have no problems with mistakes. But some people have written me letters about it. So it's searchable. It's also fun sometimes to just flip through this, read through it, read the sample sentences, look at the verb. You will reach a point where if you looked some of this stuff up, like if you looked up this one, shtuqe yatee. And once you saw this and this, you'd be able to use that verb any way you want to, just by looking it up and checking out the examples. Now, it'll take a while before you can get all of them, but there's a bunch of stuff we're going to learn in here that just says, here's how you use a verb. There's a bunch of stuff you got to sort of know about it, but then once you do, you'll be able to put it all together. So the second section is Tlingit to English. This one is also alphabetical. This is the order that they list them in. Their strategy is front of the lips to the back of the throat. That's how they alphabetize this book. So just keep that in mind. It's the dictionary that I did is also alphabetical, just sort of loosely following an English alphabet and putting it to the Tlingit letters. So it would go A vowels, then the CH. I also grouped the vowels together, which we'll get to. But so if you're looking for something that is underline K, the letter A, just keep in mind their vowel order does go I, ah. That's just a this is it right here. So they do have a different system of alphabetizing back then. They were just sort of thinking of where the sound comes from, because at the time when they published this, Tlingit was absolutely not a written language. Like there was a few things here and there, but just thinking of comparing like 1972 to now, we've got now thousands and thousands of pages of written Tlingit.
No standard orthography.
Yeah, and this is the birthplace of the current the orthography we're using, but there's a few modifications that were made to it. So when you look up a verb here, we'll just pick this one. To use an adze, this is to make a canoe, especially a dugout canoe. So what you're going to see here is the verb root with a little number sometimes. That little number means there's another one, there's another dach, but it's a homonym. It's a different verb root. And then it's going to show you the classifier and the root. It'll also show you these two things are what we'd call thematic prefixes, ʼa and ya. We're going to learn about them. And then it's going to say tr or st or in or I am. What those are telling you, which we'll get to also, is what we call transitivity. Is there a subject? Is there an object? Are there both? Are there neither? It's coded right there. Okay, and we'll talk about what all that means. Don't worry about it now. But when you look up something for here, like for example, if you read something in Tlingit and you saw this verb dach, whatever word is underlined, that's where you go look it up in English to find the examples. So we'll go look up ads, and we should be able to find it. So then you got ish sit adachin. My father used to make canoes with an adze. Kak adach ashkuken. My uncle used to know how to make canoes with an adze. That's the verb dictionary. You're gonna use it a lot, especially once you start translating. You're gonna put sentences together. We're gonna start getting into a rhythm where like we'll have the Tuesday class, we'll have the Thursday class. Towards the end of the Thursday class, I'll say, okay, over the weekend, go do this task. Go write 10 sentences about a land animal or whatever, right? We'll come up with things and you'll have opportunities to come up with ideas for us to do as well.
Is all of that in this one?
No. So yeah, so the Carrie Edwards Dictionary of Tlingit does not have all of these verbs, but it does have. I think in there it shows a theme, and it also shows, I think, a command, an imperfective, and a perfective. Maybe I don't remember. But yeah, it does have fewer verbs. Okay. The other dictionary we'll be using is the Tlingit Dictionary that I've been working on. There will probably be another edition coming out. There will be one coming out this semester because I've added some things, had to fix my currents. My currents were wonky. But so this one, this is the alphabetizing system here. And the important thing to remember is it keeps the vowels in their groups. So that does mean it's going to go E, high tone E, EI, high tone EI. So it's going to go short, low, short, high, long, low, long, high. That's how it's going to go. Because I want folks to just remember those vowels are part of a set. And they will move back and forth. Cheo can become chao. Well, I guess it's a bad example. But, you know, so as te can become te, right, for like rock. And we're going to learn all those, how does that work? There's always some sort of logic behind it. So this one has 3 sections. So Tlingit is everything that's not a verb, alphabetized. So you can go through here and it's all in Tlingit, but if you wanted to go look up cheat, go down, we got a whole bunch of cha stuff. Then we go down and there's cheat right there. It's a work in progress, so don't be surprised if you find all kinds of typos and weird things and incomplete entries and whatever. It's trying to sort of pull all of the dictionaries into one. Some people don't like that, and that's fine. They don't have to like it. But there's a lot of information that also comes from speakers who've come up with words. You know, the other dictionaries were published 15 years ago, 40 years ago, right? And so we've come up with new words since then, and there's also tons of undocumented things. So if you talk with speakers a lot, they'll tell you things that aren't in any other sources. But it's pretty straightforward in terms of how, but it's also searchable. So if you wanted to look up, if you're like, what do you call muralet? Right, so you can come up here, and you get muralet, then you can scroll through, and then you'll get to cheat. The second section is the verb, right? So for this one, it is alphabetized by verb root. And my summer project was to color code the verb themes in here. Thanks to Dave Strong, who said, you should do that. I said, I don't know if I can. He said, you can. And so I guess ʼtláa is not. But if you look here, and we'll talk about what all these colors mean. Why do they have these colors? But it's showing you the different parts. This is what we'd call the pre-verb, the words before the verb that are still part of that verb itself. You can't remove them without changing the meaning. The thematic prefix, which is basically a noun that you can attach to the verb. The classifier, every verb has one. We're going to learn all about it. And the verb root. The verb root is listed here, and so is the stem variation. And when we say stem variation, that means, will this be, what will the vowel be? That's all we're talking about. Because you'll see it shifting between short and high, long and high, long and low. Also predictable, and what we'll learn all about how and why. And then the last part is from English to Tlingit. So that's that one. And then we'll get to here. So we're going to start going through this just to review. Then we'll get up to ḥausane ʼatángi. We'll talk about that. There's a bunch of other resources that are out there. Some of them are more advanced. Some of them are, like there's Jeff Lear's notes, his verb notes, his stem lists. I think those are really important. They're really good to dive into. If you want to find all those verbs that we talked about earlier that aren't in that book, or that aren't in the Tlingit Verb Dictionary, they're in his notes. I'd say all the verbs are in there. But there's still a few undocumented verbs. But there's a whole bunch that are in there that are, the language has everything. You could say everything in a language. Questions?
Is the most current draft of the dictionary available for download?
Yep. but I'll probably update it in the next month or so. But go ahead, and then I'll probably have I will have a solution to how to get printed versions of stuff pretty soon. I'm trying to get someone to just buy it for all of us, so hopefully we'll be able to figure that out.
Kusue, new dictionary. Copy
Yeah,
version.
and they are, so like most of the stuff, I've been using Kindle publishing, which supports a monster, but it's fast and it's high quality and it's kind of cheap. But maybe I'll find a different solution. But in the meantime, I wouldn't recommend really buying them on Amazon because it does this like 200% markup, which is crazy. So I'm trying to like buy it myself and at least just sell them for cost. But I'm trying to get someone who'll just buy them for us. But I'll keep trying. If you know people with Donna, the Jiti Donna, ask them.
Digital version Kusue, because on the website it's still the 1021
Oh, really?
for
Okay. I will update.
In the class and under the tab of dictionary and the like third place it is on there and probably everywhere else.
Oh, really? Maybe I'll put a new
Huh.
link on our class. I'll put links to all of these on our. So when we do our class, well, let me put it in the chat. So that one should work. The link in the chat, and then let's talk for a second about where do you find materials that we went over in class, and where do I find my browser? Web browser. Here it is. No. There it is. Okay. Oops. Okay. Can you folks still see it? Do you folks online see this? Okay. So if this is tlingitlanguage.com, if you go to Learning Tlingit, Intermediate Tlingit, this is the old version. Is it June 7th? Okay.
Yeah, and under dictionary it has the one from October 2021, but yeah, I knew it wasn't because you go like halfway through and there's no colors in the verbs.
Okay. I will try and find what's going on with this. Huh?
Does the new one have the colors?
Yeah, it does. Okay. I will try and. What I'll do, so when a class is over, so typically you'll go down. So basically, this has all the resources. Hopefully, those links are working. We'll see. We'll talk about this verb database. We'll probably talk about the verb database tomorrow in the super class, the super duper class. These words are in Tlingit. Tlingit kachit kadushhidi. Techne kahoyna kachita sekaushihit kuk. Tlingit kuyaudahi. Tlingit audio. Downhauer audio collection. Tlingit video. I'll also put a couple additional ones up here, which are, I'll put the De Laguna stuff up here. That's the other important thing. But basically, when you come through, so right underneath here is where I'm going to start putting the classes. So I'll put Thursday's class up, which I forgot, and I'll put tonight's class up. And under there, I'll have some links, a newer link to the dictionary. And I'll just double check that all my versions, because I usually have 3 versions on my computer and I link to one of them, and so that's probably part of the problem, is I'm not updating all those files at the same time. Sheesh. Is there another question? Okay.
Did you say that when you were talking about the section that was labeled Tlingit and that everything with the verbs, that's in the dictionary that you have been working on, right? Okay.
And so when you do, so when you do look up that and stuff in that dictionary, and we're going to listen. So if you go here and we go look up something like datyesa, so then it shows us what part of speech it is. So a question particle, a relational noun, a body part, a noun, a number, and there's a description of all of those things in the introduction of the dictionary. And so, and we're going to talk about those things. So when we get towards the end of this semester, you should have a really pretty good idea of what all of those things are. And if you don't now, don't even worry about it, because that's what we're here for. But we're going to learn what all of these things are, why these terms exist. And it's all a dialogue too. Like if we're learning something and you say, hey, that should be called something else, like, let's talk about it. I don't want to reinvent the Tlingit writing system. I think it's just, it is what it is. It has benefits and shortfalls. But also, like if anybody asks you to write anything phonetically, right? Let's say you write down something, like you say, dakka for the inland. And if someone is trying to get you, because sometimes what people will do is they want you to write this as if for an English speaker. So you're going to have something like dakka, and they're going to want you, I guess, to write something like this. Just say like. Do not do this. Your answer, I mean, do what you want, but this is my advice. This is what I say. I say, oh, Tlingit is a phonetic alphabet. So I've already written it phonetically for you. What you have to do is just learn what these symbols are. We have a one sound, one symbol alphabet. Don't try to write it. But then, also don't critique people who are writing it this way also. Because you could have someone who grew up speaking Tlingit, but no one ever told them how to write it, right? So always just, there's a legend out there about an elder who told someone their name, and they said, oh, you've been saying your name wrong your whole life. I don't recommend saying anything like that. I also don't recommend, if you're talking to an elder, saying, well, actually, the dictionary says this, because like any single resource of Tlingit is just simply a photograph of a universe. The universe is large and expanding, and there might be multiple ways to say it. There might be misunderstandings. There's all kinds of, every single dictionary that's ever been made has certain things that maybe just aren't written down correctly. Because it's like, oh, well, you thought it was this thing, but it's actually that type of thing. And sometimes it takes a lot of conversation to pull this stuff out. Like getting all the different types of kelps and getting all these little fishies and all these other things. And sometimes there's concepts that are just different. So it's time to listen to a speaker as we start to wrap up today, because it's a lot of process stuff. It's a lot of sort of going over the resources, and it's important, but you're just sitting there listening to all these different things. And so we're going to listen to a speaker. Let me find. So we'll listen to it first, and then we'll take a look at what he's saying. This is Anashahash, Sam Johnston. Let me share the sound.
Agaan naxíxi yatee ʼatángi ʼatángi kidén wushin ʼatángi hashaka ahas achas qam tlachotee yatee ʼutudziteeyi kidén suyakagachtuke. Agaan naxíxi yatee ʼatángi Agaan naxíxi yatee ʼatángi agaan ke naxíxi yatee ʼatángi. Just ke gálatín Kidéin ús in aadé túné. Just ke gálatín Kidéin ús in aadé túné. Hashaka ahas achas qaim le xutudziteeyi yatee. Hashaka ahas achas qaim le xutudziteeyi yatee. Hashaka ahas achas qaim le xutudziteeyi yatee. ʼutudziteeyi Kidéin ʼatángi. ʼutudziteeyi Kidéin ʼatángi.
And now we'll go.
Can you put that link in the chat?
Yeah. What I want us to think about is there's a whole bunch of stuff we're going to learn about Tlingit. Whole bunch of stuff. And some of this is going to be pretty complex, like patterns, and grammar, and rules, and all this other stuff. But then as you like talk to a speaker or you listen to a speaker, like I'm always just blown away by how much stuff they have in their mind, right? Like it's just there. And they don't, like, you know, if you're talking to a speaker, you don't say things like, is that like a na conjugation verb? It sounds like a na. Like they're just like, what? What are you talking about? Right? This is like, I was tutoring English and I felt like I knew English pretty well. And it's like, this was my job at a university. And if someone came up, I was like, yeah, paper you want me to read or what? And they said, no, I just got a question. It's like, all right. And they said, when do you use the? When do you use a or n? And when do you not use anything? And I started to I was like, well, I have to think about that for a long time. You know, I tried to just start talking through it. And someone else came in, they were playing World of Warcraft or whatever it's called. And they said, well, we were challenged to come up with, what are these? I can't remember what they're called in English. There's like a past tense and a past perfective, I think. So like one version would be like wrote it, and the other one was like would have written it, right? But I was like, I don't know what those things are called, right? And so, but when we look at this, it's awesome, right? So, Tim Hall does a lot of work in the Slín and sent this recording to me, and I said, this is beautiful. We should use this as like a teaching tool. And so as we go through, agaan ki naxíxi yatee ʼatángi just ke gálatín Kidéin ús in aadé túné Hashuka ahas achas qaim le xutudziteeyi yatee ʼutudziteeyi Kidéin ʼatángi. And so what this does is it writes down what he said. Like we just worked on writing down, you know, he's got a certain rhythm, he's got a pattern, and different speakers from different places. Like this is one thing you'll find. The more and more you do this, there'll be certain speakers, for whatever reason, it's easier for you to understand them than some others. Could be like the speed that they talk, the dialect. There's all kinds of factors. Like I know that there's just some people when they talk, I always know what they're saying. But there's others like I just really gotta listen, and you'll find that. Right? But it's just such a beautiful concept So I'll put this. So whenever we do like something like this, like there's a slideshow on negativity in verbs. There was a slideshow on this speech, which also shows like a breakdown. Like, so one of the things that we tend to do in this class is what we call segmenting and glossing. Segmenting means we pull this apart into all of its pieces. Like, you know, it's a bit of an examination of what we're looking at, which some people don't like because, you know, they feel like it's messing with the language too much. The idea here is to say, let's take this whole thing apart and look at all those things so that when it comes back together, your brain starts thinking about what are all these things and how are they working? How can I use them? But anyway, so all this stuff will go up on our, so basically when we have a class, so there'll be a thing that says Yádi 6, 2022. So September 6, 2022. It'll have a summary of what we covered that day. Then it's going to have, it'll say handouts or resources or whatever. And then it'll have every slideshow we looked at, every document we looked at, every video that we looked at will also be on our class webpage. That way you can find them, share them, use them, download them, whatever. And I just want to say, if you want to make stuff in this language, make stuff. If you want to use stuff that I've done, go for it. I can give you all the original files of everything that I've got. You want me to export the dictionary so you could try to make an app and use the data? Go ahead. Like I'm fine with that. I think we should all be doing stuff. We should all be trying to do stuff. When there's more people doing stuff, there's, we don't get overworked, hopefully. Any last questions? I know we didn't really get to the beginning Tlingit stuff, but we will.
When you pull it apart and you're learning all these the parts of the grammar, can you do that and Tlingit in your mind, or is this a situation where you're like going from English or Tlingit to English back to Tlingit?
This is the bridge, and I think learners need that bridge because you cannot memorize the whole language. Like, it's just impossible. So like the goal here is to like pull it apart to see what the pieces are, so that as you're learning, they'll be like, oh yeah, there's that thing that we were just talking about, right? So when you see this na right here, what does that na do, right? So when you say like ya na gut, ya ana squain, or you say ya ana squain, ya ana gwain, or you hear that song, ye ya na gwain na he de ki. Once you start, you will reach a point, I think, where when you hear them, you're like, there's that thing, that's maybe, and then I think your brain starts to do some theorizing. Is that thing that I just learned about? And it's really wild, like, because I think I started learning like this one particular verb mode, right? Did this so this other thing could happen. And then I just started hearing it all over the place. But I don't know if it's just because like my ear was trying to be tuned for that. But it is a bridge, and there are people who criticize this method of like pulling it apart. But I think it worked for Mohawk. I think it's working for Dena'ina. I think there's a lot of languages that are doing that, to say, learn what these things are, start to memorize them, and start to figure out how to put them together.
Does it start to feel like directional in the mind, where you're just, it's more, I don't know how to ask the question, but does it become more experiential to where, like, when you, is not the ongoing one?
Well, in this case, it's not part of that.
Okay, but in a different example, like you were
Yes.
showing us,
Yes.
does your mind go, oh, it's, you kind of picture it ongoing or moving a certain way?
Yeah, because this one,
The gah or gah,
yeah, you'll start to think
it
that way.
starts to, so some of this, you can start to internalize this Tlingit in your mind.
Yes, because
Because for so long with the grammar, I've just, like, my brain has shut down when people start talking about classifiers and And so I just tuned it out.
Mhm.
It's like, whoa, whatever that is. So I'm just kind of wondering if, like, at some point, does it become more internal and more Tlingit and less sort of going back and forth?
I think that it does. And I do, one of the theories I have is there's a sort of decided group that's kind of anti-grammar because like they don't want to learn it, they don't want to do it, and it's understandable because it is complicated. Like the language is very complicated, and what these things try to do is say, well, let's just show you all the pieces then, and say, even though it's complicated, there's only so many moving parts, but you kind of got to know those parts in order to sort of, and so I think one of the difficulties for a lot of learners is going through this stage where it is very artificial. Because they're like, I just want to sound like grandma and grandpa. I just want to sound like these elders. And so, but it's a combination of things. And I think everybody has their own journey between how much you're doing speaking and listening, how much you're doing list building, how much you're doing grammar and breaking down how the language functions, and how much you're doing self-care. For me, it's always a balancing act between those four things. And there's probably lots of other things that are involved, but for me, those are sort of the pillars of learning and using Tlingit. And so as we sort of start to pull this apart and put it back together and pull it apart and put it back together, I think you also have to engage in conversations with people who are doing that stuff. Because then you'll start to have these aha moments, because what we're doing is we're sort of taking this whole Tlingit grammar and we're trying to construct it inside your mind, which already has an English grammar there. So it does have to compete with English in a lot of ways, because sometimes the English brain is going to say, that doesn't make sense to me, I reject it, right? Which is it was a very colonial method of saying, we reject it. Like indigenous science and science really have a hard time, because I think conceptually they're like, oh yeah, you guys know this stuff? Yeah, we know this stuff. Where'd you learn that stuff? Oh, this guy turned into a fish. Then he came back a year later and he told us how this works. And then science is like, okay, we're not going to listen to you anymore. Right? That's typically how these things work. And I think for a lot of folks too, we're going to take a slow walk to get there. Even though I'm showing you a whole bunch of stuff today, it's just sort of saying like, get yourself ready because this is the stuff we're going to do. ʼutudziteeyi. Hold your spirit steady, because we're going to go on this journey. But we'll take steps to get there, right? You don't have to know how a classifier works right now. Absolutely not. But by the end of this year, you probably should.
I pictured the Tlingit women who unraveled the Simshan robe in order to figure out how to weave chilkat.
Yeah, right? Sometimes you gotta take that masterpiece of a basket. Like, I know a master weaver who said, I saw this basket and I didn't know how to weave that pattern. So when the curator left, I brought out my little spray thing of water and I took it apart and I put it back together, and now I know how to do that. And that's drives the curators crazy. All you curators out there, just chill out. It's okay. That's a master weaver. You probably never know that she did that. Okay. Shuhan, Yigoyachwan, super duper class tomorrow. If you can't make it, it's okay. But no class on Thursday. Don't show up. If you hit that Zoom link, I'll get an email. I'm like, ha ha ha.
All the links that were put in the chat, can we have them on the class notes?
I also upload the chat.
Oh, sweet.
I just upload the chat as a text document. I usually go through the chat. I'll pull out stuff. If anyone sends me some private message and it says something that I think is not for the public, but it does go up there on the website.
I logged in via Zoom today just to see the chat.
Yeah, okay. And yeah, if you're in the class, feel free to just jump on the Zoom as well. Just don't activate your audio. Cheers, Johan.
Finish.
Yay.
Cheese.
Yay.